Welcome to this edition of the Redacted Culture Cast. Today I am joined by a man with a competitive history that extends a little bit beyond just shooting sports. But I am excited for the way this conversation goes. Would you introduce yourself?
I'm Josh Froelich, and I am a shooter, a family man, and many other things. I've focused most of my energies on masculine activities over the course of my life, masculine pursuits that are maybe on the edge of taboo as it relates to today's culture, anyway, as a norm. And I'm pretty happy about that. So I found myself doing things I enjoy most of every day.
So you're saying that we can use you as an example that the idea that men can't get anywhere for being masculine is not true?
I'd say that's fair. Yeah, I've never been shy.
Fair. Okay, so in other words, the problem with men is that they're asking for culture to give them permission to be men, and that culture refuses, and then they complain and say that it won't let them.
Yeah, don't ask for permission.
Oh, okay. Well, so am I booking tomorrow or either way? I'm sure that'll come out in a little bit. Well, this is the Redacted Culture Cast. We appreciate your patronage to our conversation. We are supported by you guys, the listeners. You can follow us at Redacted LLC on Instagram, and you can support the channel at www or World Wide Web. .redactedllc.com. And Josh, before we get too deep into this, how do people follow you and how do they find you?
Yeah, so my personal content, I do lots of it. You can find me at Josh_Froelich on Instagram or Josh Froelich on Facebook, or you go on Google and you look my name up, and there's lots of ways you can find me. Just send me a message. I track most of it, or somebody is, and sending me notes on who to contact, that kind of thing. So I'm pretty available.
Yep, and your last name is spelled different. It's not. It's
Froelich. Froelich.
Okay, so Froelich, but it's Froelich. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's very German name.
Yeah, well, ich spreche Deutsch, aber it took me a while to actually figure out how to say your name. So it was one of those things. But so Josh, I wanted to have you on this show because you could say that some people I think you can make a good argument that you represent some of the higher echelon of competition shooting. You've been shooting for a while. I got to see, as we were saying earlier, this really neat window of time in your, let's just call it, shooting career, which neither of us are really old men, so there's a lot left to happen. But I got to see you where you were competing in open division in 3-gun, and I believe open division in USPSA. It was a little while ago. And that discipline is notorious for having very expensive, very, 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 very expensive 2011s and race guns. Yeah. It's at least that's the impression you get from the outside. And when I met you, you were using a very heavily modified Glock, which can serve as, maybe a testament to the product itself, but also I didn't see you. That's what, when I met you, you started there, and then while I was competing for those 2-ish years, by the time I stopped competing, you were using kind of the pinnacle of competition handguns at the time.
Yep.
And so for me, from the outsider, I got to watch somebody who you could say was, and this is just an observation, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but what it looked like is that at this point in time, you were ambitious, but not, let's just say, it's not sponsored is the word. You were ambitious, and you had your eye on an objective. And by the time I had stopped competing, you had not necessarily made it. You hadn't achieved it, but you had come into a different level of competition. And so it looked like a progression. I got to see what looked like a progression there, and I wanted to ask you about what competition looks like and how since you've competed on so many different levels, you've been the beginner, you've been the intermediate. You gave me advice on how to move from being an intermediate to something more. I didn't take that. I didn't. It's not that I didn't accept it. I just couldn't afford it at the time. Well, going to college and shooting 3-gun on the same budget's a little rough. But so I saw that, and then you've shot nationally, and you've taken trophies, and then you shot internationally. And while the introductory level is confusing for people who are not participating in the sport, and they focus on and people who are in the beginning to intermediate levels are mostly focused on, I think, skill development, gear refinement, and they're focused on learning how to practice like stage planning and reloading a shotgun and making, refining from this LPVO or this piece of equipment and kind of tuning everything that out. At some point in time, they need to shift gears and look upwards to maybe larger pictures, like where do I compete? How do I compete? How do I fit that into my budget? How do I build this training schedule? And so I was wondering if you could kind of tell that story a little bit and some of the key points along the way. Sure. On how you started competition shooting, and then where you had like really key milestones in that journey.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'd say early on, when folks are getting started in competition of any kind in the action shooting sports, we all see these next little trinkets as maybe the thing that's going to take us to the next level. That could be a trigger, that could be springs, that could be you name it, whatever the widget is. And when we met, I was running that raced out Glock. That the fact was, realistically, and this is the advice I give to folks all the time getting into the games, like pick a gun that works. And if I'd have left that Glock the way that it was when I got it from the factory, put like a dot on the slide and just shot it, I would have gotten way better, way faster than swapping every other part that was on that thing. And so these are lessons that took me a long time to learn. But early on, I was chasing like that next little gear piece where I should have been focused on my personal skill development a little bit more. And so after a couple of years of focusing on maybe the wrong things, I got pretty frustrated with not improving at a level that I thought I should be improving at. And so it was one of those buy once, cry once things. I'm like, okay, well, I know I need all the good gear. I do know I need that. Like, you want a race car if you want to race cars. I want a race gun if I'm going to race guns. But like, I don't want to tinker with it. I'm not super handy. I just want to develop the skills to run it well. So I just went out, kind of at that point where we probably shot our last match or two together and was running all the high end stuff. And I just made it happen one way or another because I didn't want to tinker anymore. I just wanted pros to build me the gear so that I could work on skill development and really take that where it needed to go. And then I could practice instead of troubleshooting. Troubleshooting gear every time you go to the range, you don't get better at shooting. You get better at troubleshooting. And so I wanted to stop messing with that stuff and just focus on skills. And so I'd say that maybe that was the first huge leap that I made in the comp space, where it was like, okay, I was competitive at a local level while I was tinkering with gear and messing around. I was competitive at a national level when I started just learning skill development and having gear that worked. Like, you could always get one more little edge by swapping a spring or something. Don't do that. I don't mess with it. I get good guns, get good gear. I have them tune it the way that it's going to be reliable and work well. I do run nice stuff, but at the same point, I just shoot it, and I don't look for that maybe just a little bit more edge, right? Like my adjustable gas on my AR, I get it to where it locks the bolt back, and I crank it like 4 or 5 more cranks when it's cold out, so that I know it's just going to work everywhere I go in the country. I'm not on that bleeding edge, and I just shoot and I practice, and that is what it really took for me to get, that and a whole hell of a lot of work to get competitive at a national level. So I'd say that was maybe the first big lesson along the way, is just quit worrying about the little widget that you could buy that could help you get there, and develop a skill that lets you get there with the guns and gear you have.
I think it's an interesting question when it comes to gear, because I come from a lot more of the tactical space, and so complete confession here. When I got out of the military and had been working sort of as a professional, whatever you want to call it at the time, because I was no longer in the military, but I was deploying still. I admit to a certain amount of hubris. I thought, well, if I buy the right gun, I certainly have the skill, and I should be able to walk into a 3-gun match and just completely crush it. I was very wrong. It was like it literally took one November 2-gun match in my first November 2-gun match in like 2015, or maybe it was October. And it was like, oh, okay, these people know how to shoot. Like I walked into that match thinking I knew what I was doing. But there's this romanticism in the tactical side. There's this romanticism in the tactical side that can happen from time to time that turns into chasing the dragon, chasing that next piece of gear, chasing that next pouch or that next piece. And I'm interested in hearing how you I'm sorry, I appreciate that input. You said you became a good competitive shooter when you stopped focusing on too many parts of the gear.
Yeah.
But I got a question there. Were you only capable of doing that after you went through the process of like tinkering your way through? Because you learned a lot of stuff on the side. You just also learned a lot of things not to care about.
Yeah. I guess it makes me truly appreciate that it's it's the Indian, not the arrow, right? At the end of the day, like I need to be able to do all of the things with many guns to be able to do them really well with my gun of choice, right? And so like it's part of the reason I cross train, right? Like I race AKs, I race pistol caliber carbines, I race AR-15s, I shoot pistols, I shoot shotguns. If it's semi-automatic and it holds a lot of rounds, I work on developing skill with it so that I'm cross-functionally just a good shooter. I know how to run a trigger fast and hard up close. I know how to shoot it, a precision gun that things far away. Like I work those skills so that when I pick up a gun, I can shoot a few rounds through it or dry fire it a few times, and I understand what it takes in order to run that thing the way that it needs to be run to hit the things I want to hit.
Are you familiar with a Fight Light MCR?
Fight Light MCR? No.
It's an upper receiver that can take either belt fed or or a box mag.
Yep.
Would that fit into open division, or is there?
Well, there's no capacity division or restriction in most rifles in open division. So
yeah, I mean, my point being is it takes a belt, but it's using an AR-15 lower, so like it's not like it's a fully automatic firearm. So like, no advantage.
It would
maybe in one stage
on the course of fire. Yes, exactly. Yeah,
it'd be one very expensive advantage for one very expensive match. Yes. But it's not the match of life. Okay, well, the point I was saying is this: I think there's a little bit of a romanticism when it comes to gear refinement, as in you have this idea of the competitor who he goes to the match, he shoots the match, he comes home, he takes notes, he pulls out his file, he makes a little teeny adjustment on something, and by the time he's a master shooter, every single element of every single piece of gear is so refined that he's like a craftsman and an alchemist and a marksman. And I'm saying this because like I kind of had this idea at one point in time. It's like I thought, well, I want to shoot competition, so I started reloading my own ammunition. I bought a couple of guns, and I started like tweaking my gear. And I found out very quickly that the amount of time I spent tweaking on my gear, not tweaking like drugs, but like making adjustments and blah, blah, blah. And all the other things going on was taking up time that should have been spent competing, and I should have been practicing, And so I was doing dry fire drills, but the time, a lot of the time was spent kind of chasing this dragon.
Yeah. And
you had given me advice at one point in time, and he said something to the extent of, at some point in time, you're going to hit, this is a paraphrase of yourself, at some point in time, you're going to hit a wall where in order for you to move to the next skill level, you're going to have to shoot 1,000 rounds a week. And there's no way to, and what I took from that, maybe in like apostrophe on the side, or not apostrophe, was, and there's no way that anyone can tell you how to make that happen, but that's what you got to do.
That's fair.
Would
Yeah,
you say would you say that advice still holds?
There's very few exceptions.
Okay.
People that truly are masters at their craft, but fire very few rounds. And you know, like I've got a buddy, his name's Scott Green. He's a West Coast guy, top level competitor I shoot with. Probably shoots like 5,000 rounds a year and can bang. He can shoot like crazy. It's amazing, and I'm shocked by it because, I mean, if you think about anything, right? Like when you're a new driver, or if you drive a car once a month or something like that, like you're thinking about the things you're doing while you're driving. If you drive every day, all day, you just drive. Like you zone out. Like you need to be that way when you're shooting. And so, like, if I want to be good at driving, I drive a lot. If I want to be good at shooting, I shoot a lot. Like if I want to be good at anything, I want to just get it to a point where it's almost second nature to do that activity. I'm not thinking about the next thing. I grip solid no matter what. I got a gun in my hand, right? Like all of those things just come together when you do all the right stuff and training on a regular basis. And for me, that magic really, it goes away when I'm shooting less than like 1,000 rounds ballpark a week. Is like I start to have to think about doing the right stuff. Like I'll shoot a couple rounds with the pistol and I'm like, man, that grip is soft. Tighten that thing up on my support hand. It's like, oh, okay, there it is. Dot's moving the way it's supposed to now. Like if I'm shooting the way that I should and shooting the rounds downrange that I need to, those types of things that only come with true recoil, like managing recoil, actual shooting that I don't get in dry fire, you know, those polish right up and get way better when I'm shooting at that level.
Okay, so it sounds a little bit like a difficult to make tangible standard. You're saying, on the one hand, you say 1,000 rounds a week is generally where you find, and it's not balance, but you generally find that that's
familiarity.
Familiarity is the maintenance level required. And then on the other hand, you're saying, I know when I'm practicing not enough because the way it feels when I'm shooting and where my attention is drawn.
Correct.
And so, because there was a kind of a question that was boiling in my head. How do you tell yourself when you know you're switched on? And is that kind of the answer?
Yeah, the answer is everything just feels right. You know, it's like I can zone out while I'm doing it and do all the right things. You know, just like if you were driving a car, right? You drive in heavy traffic all the time. You can switch lanes, 2-3 lanes. You're comfortable doing it, right? You know when you got to look over your shoulder an extra time because you haven't been on these busy roads for a while, right? Like that's the same feeling when I'm shooting. It's like either I'm on or I'm not, and if I'm not, I need reps.
Was there a moment was there like a first moment when everything felt right? Was there like, or was it something that you didn't really recognize until you could know when you didn't? Like when you take vitamins?
Yes. Yeah, it was like that. Because when I first got into shooting pistols and I really just like started to develop skill, I bought like 10 buckets of bullets. Like I had these golden, the Remington golden bullet buckets, like 1,400 round buckets. And in one summer, I just shot all those through my Glock with like an Advantage Arms 22 upper on it, and was just, like I knew what it felt like when I was shooting well, right? And like that's where I started shooting, was just through this compulsive, like maybe I'll put it this way. So I'm a junkie for anything that makes me feel good. Like I've got a chemical dependency history, and I learned that if I point that type of, that's just me, I'm not going to change who I am. If I point that compulsion or that addiction at things that make me feel good but are also positive, like I can be pretty successful at them, or like they work out in my favor as long as I'm putting those efforts in a positive direction. Well, when I started pointing that at shooting early on, I was like, oh wow, like that came together really well. And then when I cut back on rounds, slow down on shooting a little bit, be like, this is not how shooting's supposed to feel. Like I know there's something wrong because I'm obviously not doing this enough. I need to double down in this area. And so that would be maybe an adjustment point for me.
Okay, so that kind of digs into the heart of it, of you. It's not that it was filling a need, but it was something that you could direct your energy into, and it wasn't so much a feeling of that you made it, that you've got it. Like it's, you have your mojo. It's that, when it's not there, and then you could kind of hone in your direction. And you said you started with a 20, like the buckets of 22s. Cause I didn't. Okay.
Yeah. Rimfire. Yeah.
Okay. You're not the only person I've heard doing that. And the other one kind of lives in legend within my family. He's actually an Alaskan hunting guide right now.
Okay.
We're not related, but it's interesting how his story on how he started shooting was he had a couple of buckets of 22, buckets of 22 rounds.
Yep.
And he just practiced until he could shoot pennies out of the air. And it's like, I always thought that kind of concept was apocryphal. Well, I didn't always. I thought it was really cool. But once I started shooting, I was like, this is no way this is true. And now I'm wrong again. Thanks.
Well, it's just reps, right? Like that was the only way that I could possibly afford at that point in my life to do the kind of shooting that I wanted to do. And so it's like, well, yeah, I had a 9mm gun, but like I can't afford to shoot 500 rounds on a Saturday with that 9mm at that point in my life. So I'm like, what can I afford to shoot? Like, well, $250, I can buy this other slide and I can go get these buckets of 22 shells and I can learn what it takes to hit targets. And so that was the way that I pursued pistol shooting early on.
So that raises a bit of a question because obviously a 22 does not have the same recoil as a 9mm, and so you're dealing with kind of I'm sorry, it doesn't have the same recoil, but also like the slide probably doesn't move at the same rate, so you're dealing with all these different factors.
Yeah.
But I guess the question would be, can the allegory be made towards, or not the allegory, but can it be made towards competition shooting or starting to shoot with a 9mm or 22 versus like an airsoft gun? Or is
I would say yes, 100%. I mean, what you're learning there isn't recoil management. That's not the same. You're learning things like how to grip the gun so when you pull the trigger, it goes straight back and you actually hit the target, right? I'm not hitting low left because I pull a lot. Like I know how to pull a trigger straight back so it goes where I want it to. And, some of those skills, like how to present the gun so that the dot's always in the window, how to present and get that gun on target, transition between targets, stuff like that all comes together. And so I'd say dry fire is the base, and you learn some things in dry fire. Things like airsoft or rimfire, I would say would be another level where you're learning additional things. Even when I get to a point where my race guns feel like cheating, right? I'll go back to something that has a little bit more recoil because it forces me to tighten things up again and get my grip back. I can't be lazy, right? And so like there's all these levels of different guns and platforms or different training techniques will teach you different things. And I think that the more simple you make it early on, like rimfire requires very little as it relates to grip to actually manage that recoil. Okay. So I took that out of the equation. Now what am I working on? Presenting and trigger press. Like I have less to work on to hit that target. As I make it more difficult, I'm adding in more skills that I need to be proficient at. And is that the right path? I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's one I used, and I think it served me well.
That's such a Minnesotan answer. Is it the right path? I don't know. It's like, well, Josh. I mean, like, I don't intend to flatter you, but you're not really in the position where you can be like, oh, I don't know. It's like, okay, whatever, whatever, man. It kind of works, I guess. It's like, well, like
that's
as
fair.
You're polishing a trophy or something like that. Like I said, I don't intend for it to be flattery. It's like,
you're right. I get it.
But
I'm teaching my daughter the same way, if that means anything.
Mm-hmm.
So like I have 9 and 10-year-old daughters.
Well, yeah,
they can shoot because we've worked on these same skills. My daughter just harvested her first deer, 248-yard shot with an AR-10, no problem, crushed it, totally confident. I was like, are you sure? You good? She's like, oh yeah, bam, done. Like little savages. They know how to shoot because we've been shooting since they were like 6 years old and started with things simple like rimfire. I like it from an introductory standpoint.
Yeah,
shooters for sure.
Well, no, I started on a 22 as well. I think our generation, if I grew up from a hunting family, a very much so hunting, and some military in there too, mixed. But yeah, it's like we hunted, we shot. I had a 22. I knew how to shoot a 22, and that kind of broke me of like the flinch and the fear of recoil, and so much so that when I've said this before on the show, but when I got in the military and I shot the M4 for the first time, I was extremely underwhelmed. I thought it was going to be something different. And it's just like, oh, okay, because I had shot a Mini 14 before, and so that could harken into how often it is the case that the people who have the most experience and knowledge on firearms are sort of relegated away from the quote unquote public conversation. But I want to keep moving in track. You started competing.
Yeah.
It was a bit of like, it was for you being able to hone in on something and focus your energy on something, kind of not necessarily build a dependency on it, but be able to like focus that energy into, becoming good at something. And then at some point in time you decided, okay, I'm chasing gear and trinkets. I need to stop chasing gear and trinkets and just focus purely on skill.
Yep.
And you were starting to shoot this is where you started to shoot a lot more national matches, right?
Yeah. At that point I was shooting nationals around the country. Yeah.
Okay. So can you explain to me, as if I don't understand, because it's actually more likely true, how national matches work and how you would make decisions on which ones to go to? Because they're not all the same.
Yeah, that's fair. It's super tough when you're looking from the outside in. It's like, I could be a champion. There could be 10 other champions in 3-gun. You're like, you guys all won championships? Who's the champ? It's like, okay. So each match, most of them are unaffiliated. So there are affiliations these days. There used to be stuff like 3-Gun Nation, right? Today, there's stuff like USPSA, which is prestigious if you win. There's newer things like Max Leograndis' PCSL. But for the most part, when you're looking at big matches, you want to go shoot a big match, national level match around the country, you're looking at who's going. That's what I'm looking at, because I'm not necessarily interested in just winning a title, but you're interested in who's going to be there that I can test myself against. And so when the big matches are announced, there's a bunch of us kind of looking around going, all right, if it's new or we haven't gone there in the past, it's like, well, who shoots it? And so it is confusing from the outside looking in. It's hard to say. It's like, well, who's the best shooter? It's like, well, there are a bunch of good shooters, and who is the best on a day? Well, sometimes that's me. Sometimes that's another dude. And, it is kind of hard outside looking in.
Okay, so it's not like an MMA style thing where you kind of have your rankings and you can pick people there. You said not just me; it's who's going there. This sounds a lot like some form. This sounds almost like a fictional novel, like a spy thriller. Like, oh, that's Steve McQueen. He's a spy for the Brits. He's in here to. Oh, we're going. How did you other than just straight up talking to these, did you just talk to them like, oh, I know this guy's are you going to this match? Are you going to this match? Is that how you just did it? Like you just talked to them?
Yeah, early on, I'd just wait. I'd be like late on registration, and I'd look at registration. I'd go, dang, all right, look at all that heat. I mean, there are a list of 20 dudes that I would love to see how I stack up against.
Okay.
I'm going. Like, that sounds awesome. And, depending on your level in the game, there are casualists. I was never casual. I'm not casual at anything. If I'm doing it, I'm all in. And so when I look at stuff like that, that's how I look at it. A lot of other guys are going, well, is this a cool and different experience? Like if your goal isn't to win the match, it's like, okay, why are you going to this one then? Is it a cool and different experience with unique stages, unique obstacles? Is the range something special? Like, what is it about the event that makes you want to go there if your goal is to, be in the top half? Like, what are you looking for then? And so there's a lot of things you can look for, different styles of match director. But yeah, I'd say if you're looking at the maybe top 20 dudes at any big match, they're looking at who else is there because they want to go test themselves against the best dudes.
Okay, so some people are going to the match. Are you saying that some people go to the match because they want to simply compete against other people who they see in their skill level? Whereas some people want to go to the match just because they like the environment and they want to try something new. And some people want to go to the match because they just want to get onto a leaderboard somewhere. It's kind of like...
All of that is in the mix. I mean, this action shooting or shooting at championship levels, like, you can be a complete hobbyist, just like guns. Maybe you shoot once a month, but like you have an interest in going and shooting one of these matches. Like, I might be on the squad with you. Like, we could be shooting the match together. Like, our goals could be totally different at these championships. Not all of them. Some of them aren't put together like that. But for the most part, at the big events in the country, you can sign up if it's your first match. Like, you can just come out and shoot because you're interested in it, because it's a hobby. Like, which is pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Possible.
So yeah, because I think I went in thinking I was looking forward to the experience, and when I shot my first major match, I was thinking, wow, I'm finally going to a major match. I put money down. I figured out all the travel cost, and it cost me a pretty penny.
Yeah.
But it was, I went there completely looking to expect to have sort of a well-polished, unique stage design. And I was extremely disappointed because I could have built every stage in my backyard, which could have been, that could have been multiple factors, but where it ran into me, and kind of like the conversation we had with Dustin, was that, well, I probably should have asked the people that I was competing against which competition major matches I should have asked the people I was competing against on the local level, who I was, back in Minnesota, which matches to attend and how to and how to budget for them and figure out which ones. And so that helps. So you started, but when you started focusing on national level competitions, you were focusing on people that you would compete against. It was less about the location. It was less about the experience. It was more about, this guy's going to be here. I know that he's accomplished in this field. I want to test against him, maybe learn something from it.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. As iron sharpens iron, really does seem to come.
It's true. And I'll still do the same thing. I mean, especially now, you referenced that, that world level. And I did go over and shoot that world championship in that IPSC match. And that primary goal of that was, I know exactly where I stood in the U.S. at that point, shooting shotguns. I had, I'm a big dude. Like, if there's a gun that I'm going to be the best at in the world, it's shooting shotgun, because I'm like 6'1.5", 250. Like, I don't get pushed around by a shotgun. But on the little guns, like, nobody gets pushed around by them. So it's like, it's different. If I'm going to be good at something, like the best at something, I knew it'd be shotgun. And so I spent
So you naturally shot open division, so you didn't have to learn how to quad load. I got it.
Yeah, quad loading's dumb. I always look at the skills required for division. I was like, where else am I going to use that? I'm like, I can just stick this 20 round mag in the bottom of the gun, and then I can keep shooting. I'm like, that's better. So I'm going to do that. But yeah, so that world level, that was what it was. I'd been shooting all the shotgun matches in the U.S. And after about 18 months of, I was able to win all of them that I'd shot for about a year and a half. And I was like, well, what does the world got? Like, let's see where I stack up on the world stage. That sounds interesting. And so went over and did that, which was pretty cool.
Okay. So what was it? What is it? What was that world competition like? What was it? Not first, what was it like as in, like, in reference to American stages? How was it different? Yeah. And then also, how was it dealing with an international crowd? And then the third part about it is, like, what was it like seeing other people try to look into American shooting? What was that?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, U.S. is very high capacity and yeehaw about our shooting. We love it. Like, give me a 60 round shotgun stage. Let's go. And the world stage is not that. Like, they had like 8 round stages that were like a second and a half or 2.5 seconds. Like, the buzzer goes off and you shoot like 6 things, and then a clay comes and flies, and you got to hit that too. And so if any of those are penalties, like, you're in like 500th on that stage. Like, you've got a major problem. So it's all about consistency and making 0 mistakes, versus in the U.S. it's like explosive power. I need to run as fast as I can. I need to slam reloads and just shoot quick. Well, the world stage style was just much more refined, more gentlemanly, lower round count, no mistakes, just consistency. And I knew that. I did my homework. So I spent about 6 months getting ready for that.
And they let you in. How?
They let me come play.
Oops.
Yeah.
It's funny. Okay, so the outside world looks in and sees American competition shooting as high adrenaline and a lot of movement, and then you look at like the American gun culture, and we oftentimes look at competition shooting as very stationary. It's like you've got I could not imagine what it'd be like going from I shoot a 1.5 second 8-round stage to, hey, this is the tactical games. Good luck.
Yeah.
You mean I need to run up that hill? Yeah, put this plate carrier on.
Yeah, it's different. It's cool though. I mean, it's its own thing. That's the other part about picking matches. It's like, okay, well, what is this match and what's their style and like what does it take to win? And a lot of being really good at comp shooting is being a problem solver and doing homework, understanding what you're about to get into, coming up with a plan, training based on that plan, and then execution and mental game. Those pieces all come together.
So give me an example of, you said problem solving. Give me an example of what you mean by that, because I don't want that to get lost.
Yeah. So problem solving is plain and simple. So like if I walk into a stage and, for instance, in the US, we get to walk our stages and get a plan, like from where you're going to shoot it from. IPSC on the world stage, you never get to step foot on the stage until it's time to shoot. You can see it from 10 or 15 feet back, but in order to really develop the skills necessary to execute on that 6 months before I went to Worlds, I never stepped foot on a stage before I shot it. Even in the US, I'd stand back, I'd develop the skills necessary in order to make a plan from back here, because I knew I'd have to when I got to the world stage. And so it's like, that's a problem. I've never experienced that before. Okay, I'm going to put myself in that scenario here now for half of a year. And then when I get there, the stages are going to be these small little European stages versus my big US stages that I figured out how to do this at. It's going to be a strength by the time I get there. So that's an example.
Well, it's very deliberate, and I appreciate that. When Josh Froelich moves from Master Sergeant Froelich to Brigadier General Froelich, I'm just watching the battlefield. I thought it's funny. I'm just watching from back here and making my strategy. All right, it's but it's interesting that you pointed that out as a deliberate factor, as in like I knew that I wasn't going to be able to walk the stage in 6 months, so for 6 months I didn't walk the stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's an example. And then the other stuff is really, it's okay. In the US, I'm forced to, or not forced, I can have 20 round mags. I can have high capacity. Like on a big field course in the US, I can reload the gun wherever I want because I got all these rounds in it. So I just drop a mag whenever I've got room to move and I stick a new one in. Over there, if you're going to take 2 steps and shoot 9 shots, 8 shots, whatever, and you've got a 10 round mag, if you miss anything, like your reload has to be on spot. Like you better be able to slam a load in less than a second on those guns. And so those were the problems that I acknowledged. These are gaps I had because of my style in the US. And so as I'm looking at that, I'm going, okay, better develop the skills necessary in order to execute when I get there.
What shotgun did you use on the world match?
Yeah, I shoot Distant Arms KL-12, which is a AK shotgun.
Okay, so you brought your box. You brought your open gun over.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And that was America was not the only person showing up with an open gun, correct?
No, in fact, that's on the world stage at open. Like, I mean, I'm shooting against the Russians. Like, these are Russian guns. Like, those guys are going, like, you have a Russian gun. It's like, yeah, well, I do. You're right. Yeah, I'm gonna get you with it too. So it was fun to go over there and shoot what predominantly our U.S. would not show up with those guns and do well. And so the Russians had an opinion of how we would perform when we got there and didn't go as planned. So.
Good for you. representing the country.
Yeah, damn right.
True patriot. Yes, the Cold War never ended. Josh Froelich. We need it. Yeah, we're gonna send a. I hope you have room on your plot of land for a helicopter to land because we need you to save the Republic. It's like, oh, that'd be hilarious. It's like a Rambo. Like, I'm just a competition shooter. We need you.
Yes.
Your special set of skills.
Yes. No one shoots back.
Yeah. Right. But it is interesting. All right. So shifting gears from competition, you do a lot more. You do a lot more than just compete. And this, I've known that this has been a long conversation because I was talking to you 6 or 7 years ago on how do you turn how do you turn this concept of competition shooting into something that sustains you. Just to even beat it out easier. At a certain level of competition shooting, it seems like you have to go pro in a certain sense where like you're saying 1,000 rounds, you have to be able to budget 1,000 rounds a week was your example. That means time and money need to be committed to it. It needs to be scheduled in. That time and money, that money has to come from somewhere, and that time has to be contributed, focused on something. And if your work, whatever you're doing for labor, is taking up 60 hours of your week, that gets you your finance to pay for the stuff. You can have the things but not do the things, and and I don't think there's any perfect ecosystem of trying to make it work. You seem to have made competition shooting work for you, but you do quite a bit more than that. And would you kind of peel back the veil into how Josh Froelich organizes his life so that you get to continue to pursue the thing that you can put your motivation into, as well as feed the family, build the home, pay for the land, and keep growing? And how can you peel that onion or that layer, that veil back a little bit and let us peek in?
Yeah, absolutely. But so for my whole adult life, I've been a marketing professional and sales professional. It's what I do. And so I was early on in the tech space and have spent a lot of time in consulting and technical consulting as it relates to cybersecurity, infrastructure, stuff like that for businesses. And so I started in that world of marketing and sales. And then when I got into comp shooting, I'm going, well, there are all these brands that nobody knows about, but they make great stuff. And so I'm going, I bet I could help them and they could help me in return, right? And so they could help make some of this possible. So from an early point, maybe a couple of years in, once I learned that I had some value to deliver for some of the brands that are around the firearms industry, I started representing them and adding value for brands so that we would have a good partnership, mutually beneficial. They'd help me do my thing too. So I'd say early on, I had pursued sponsorships with companies, but like not the, hey, send me some stuff and I'll like shoot it. It was like, okay, like let's have a partnership where I work hard for you and you add some value for me to help me do my thing. And that was the beginning. And that was probably all I did for a few years there. But these days, there's a lot more that I do in order to make all of that work. And so I guess you could summarize it with like the mission of all of the things are under an umbrella that is like to share the shooting sports with the world, right? I own Froelich Firearms, and that business mission is to share the shooting sports with the world. And inside of that is my training business, where I teach people about firearms of all skill levels, give them cool experiences around guns, help them develop the interest and know how to run them safely, stuff like that. And then on the other side, I run a media company, F5 Productions, which is sharing digital media content on the shooting sports so that people actually know we exist. Because no one was telling the story if I didn't tell it myself. And so I was going, well, I should absolutely be producing more media. And so today we do training for individuals. I still represent brands, and we do media for brands and myself that share all of this with the world, which ultimately will help grow what we're doing.
Okay, so the relationship between a competitive shooter and a sponsor, was not very is not doesn't seem to be a very well defined environment, for better and
No.
for worse. Now,
Yeah.
I'm going to say for better and for worse, because on the one hand, it's very easy to get somebody's brand's vector image and put it on a jersey.
Yep.
But on the other hand, there's no like template out there for how do you develop a relationship with a company that puts money in your bank or ammunition in your house,
Yep.
in your mag. Sorry.
Yep.
So yeah, ammo in my house, whatever.
I got a little ammo in my house. Yeah.
A little. Well, the ATF will be visiting. I hope you don't have a dog.
Multiple.
Oh no! I've seen the pictures. So here's the point, though, is that like that. Okay, so that environment is murky, especially from the outside looking in, and it's easy to look a little jaded at that. And it's like, oh well, he's just a sponsored shooter, and he's got all the blah 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 blah, right?
Yeah.
So how did you define and start to figure out where you could add value and see legitimacy in that? Because it's easy to say, I shoot competitions, I'll bring your guns in there, I'll win competitions, your guns will be in winning competitions. That sounds like maybe a crayon drawing of a marketing plan, you know?
Yeah.
And so since I'm not a Marine, I'm an educated man. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I just make it sound smart. Doesn't mean I'm smart. So how did you like develop that acumen for saying, okay, is it raw metrics? Well, I have a YouTube page that gets 1 million views a month. Your product will be featured in 1 million views a month. Is it your brand is, would you go to a company and like make an assessment of their, how did you do that? Like it's sometimes, for me, sometimes it makes sense, but sometimes it doesn't. And the reason why I'm able to see it is because of the positions that I've held, but it still sometimes doesn't seem very clear. And then also the main goal for this one is that if somebody's listening to the show and they're like, well, I want to get involved in competition shooting, or I have been involved in competition shooting, how do I like add value? So much of modern gun culture, which is why I'm white-pilled about this, or I'm optimistic, is focused on adding value.
Yeah.
It's so much less about this piratistic, self-atomized, jaded, mentality of the FUDs, where like everyone but me is corrupt and everything is bad and blah, and every company that makes a thing is just in it for money. It's like, well, excuse me, dude, but like I do like to pay the bills on the house. So,
nice, yeah.
But the point that I'm saying is like it's not that those things don't happen. It's that from your ability to make an influence, where did you see where you could add value, and how did you direct energy towards that in a way that was meaningful?
Yep. Yeah. And so the answer is different for every company. So typically when I'm talking to an organization that I want to partner with, it's because I already have some of their gear. I really like their gear. They've got a good reputation. One of those things, right? Like they're supporting a bunch of events, and I see that, and I see that they're invested in our sport. Okay. So then I want to understand what's important to these folks. Are they a new brand? Well, if so, I want to help them grow brand awareness and sales, right? Because that's what a new brand would be spending money in our sport to do. Brand awareness, sales. Are they an established brand that has been around a long time? They still want brand awareness and sales, but maybe now it adds more value for them that I shoot over 100,000 rounds a year. Like, hey, what if I shot 50 or 75,000 rounds through your gun over the next 18 months? Would that add value for your organization from an R&D perspective? Because I can do that. I can give you real feedback. Like every company is different. And so when I'm talking to folks, I'm going, hey, like what's the goal? Like what's the goal today in the space? Like what are you hoping to achieve by being here? Right. And then I understand what their underlying motives are. And I make a determination at that point. Can I do that? Like, do I really think those are skills that I want to and am capable of offering to this company? And if so, well, sweet. Let's figure out a plan. What does that look like? Add metrics around it. Make it make sense from a business perspective. And some of that is those views on YouTube or, on social. Some of that is, hey, you know what? Last year I was in a bunch of these different magazines and you're already paying for like ads in them. Like, what do you pay for that? I can get your logos, your branding, your guns, your gear there without you paying for it to the magazine. Like, what do you pay for that? Why don't you pay me that? Like, so there are certain tangible things that we can do, but like, you can't even guess without asking. You got to have good conversations on the front end. You just go, hey, listen, like, I like your brand. I like the reputation. Your people are solid. I want to work with you. How do I help you win? Like, what is it that you hope to gain by being here? You want comp shooters to shoot your guns because we shoot a lot? Well, guess what? I shoot more than most of them. So, like, maybe I can help from an R&D perspective. Like, those kinds of things go a long way. Yeah.
Okay. So on the one hand, it's you started you typically, or you only really approached a company. That's two way to say it. You typically started, but with you already had the product in hand. You had spent the money and the time, and you bought the thing, and you've been doing some stuff with it for a while. So it's achieve a level of being able to possess the item before you go into developing a relationship with the company.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's 100% like a requirement, but I think what is important is the moment that I affiliate or align with a partnership, some brand, whatever that might be, a person, a brand, you name it, like now whatever their reputation is my reputation. And
Fair.
So you're like, okay, if their product is not good and I don't know that, but I'm going for a quick buck, big problem. If I have their product, I trust it, or they have a good rep. They've been around a long time. Like, some of those things are like, I need to make sure if I align with someone that it's a good fit for my brand too, right? And
so there's due diligence on your side that is included in that's included in your brand relationships is not purely focused on maybe the profit, or maybe it is in sort of an Ayn Randian sense, where like you partnering with somebody who you don't respect is actually a short-term benefit for a long-term loss. And it's, you can get pretty meta about it fast. And I don't mean that in a good way. Okay. So your relationships with companies was driven by, you're familiar with the product, and you figure out, you first you become familiar and you use the product, and not first, but typically you have this relationship is one necessary component. Another necessary component is you're able to identify, whether it's just through conversation or observation, where they're at and what they need and what they're going for. And then you present a solution. Okay. So you're looking, I thought the interesting part was the new brand versus the established brand is a really good point. Do you want awareness and sales, which everyone's going to say yes, but that isn't, it is one thing, or are you trying to refine the product through experience and endurance and see if it lasts 100,000 rounds?
Yep.
What does 100,000 rounds do to a gun? I've never shot. I've shot guns in the military. I've shot that much, but I've actually never worn out a competition gun.
Okay. Well, it'll certainly smoke the rifling in any barrel. Yeah, most of the barrels that I shoot, I swap around 50, 55, 75 on like 9mm, stuff like that. Go pretty far. For the competition requirements, the accuracy requirements of comp. So, like, again, if I was bullseye shooting, I'm not. That would probably change. But once they start opening up, they open up fast. So that's first and foremost. Barrels will shoot out at that point. Other than that, mostly if it's well-made parts and there weren't any manufacturing issues, they'll last if you'd swap springs and keep them oiled up. I've had a lot of stuff break. We break a lot of stuff on prototype guns where it's a new part, new machining, something that they're trying that's new, whatever, a new material that was a little lighter. I do a lot of beta tests on prototype stuff and I'll break it. And that's the whole point. Like, when someone asks me, they're like, you want to test this? It's like, yes, but it will break. And as long as we have an understanding that I'm not insulting you when I let you know that it's broken, and then I'm going to give you feedback on how it broke, why it broke, how many rounds are on it, what I did to maintain it, like all of those things. It's not a personal shot, but I will break anything you send me.
Do you publish those findings typically? Like, do you, because
No.
Okay, you don't. So that's a private relationship.
Correct.
All right. Because what is it? Sage Dynamics, Aaron Cowan, he has his like public version of something like that. He's got his burn down.
Got it.
and his drop tests, and he shows you what it looks like. And sometimes people are very interested in what those. Well, it's the torture test thing. Like, how many different ways can you do a Mark 18 torture test? The answer is one more. Well, I threw it into I threw it in a vat of molten lava, and it still fired. Like, oh well, sweet. Okay, yeah. So, yeah. but for your relationship, that's typically behind closed doors. It's like they're working on a prototype, you go blast it out. Then you send it back, and they're like, "Okay, this is where the glass is weak."
Yep, and then we refine it, and then I take the next gen. Sometimes I'm beating on stuff for 2 years before it hits the market, and so it's fun when I get to see stuff actually hit the market because I'm like, "Man, that thing is ready!" Like, or it's not. One of the two, and either way, you get a little bit of ownership, so it's fun. Like, I actually do enjoy making cool stuff or being a part of companies that are making cool stuff. The one other gap, and this is another way to look at the sponsorship piece I forgot to reference, is maybe you don't know any of those things. Like, you don't know any of those things, what their goal is, what they're hoping to achieve, none of it. If you step in and are willing to work pretty inexpensively that first year, like, one of the stories I tell is like how I aligned with Vortex, and I'd already bought their scope, and for a partnership, I literally reached out to the owner and was like, "Hey, listen, like, if you send me a throw lever for this scope and a ball cap, I'll work my ass off for you this next 12 months. And if you like what we do together, then we'll talk about something bigger next year." Right? Like, because I knew that was a brand I wanted to work with. And so I was like, I don't know anything about them. They don't know me. I'm going to just work really hard and make myself super valuable to a brand that I want to be affiliated with. And then we'll figure something out from a compensation perspective later. Like, that is one other way to get in to some brands that might be more difficult than others to pursue.
When it comes to that, being willing to enter into a working relationship, do you have advice for people do you have a rubric or advice for people who are looking at that, and how do you protect people who are willing to work and don't have the experience from being taken advantage of?
Yeah,
like easy example, major gripe against the gun culture is that we pay people trash. Like, you're working a 40-hour. If there are people in gun culture that think, oh, well, I'll pay you $12 an hour. Like, excuse me, dude. Like, I'm literally running your company, so the answer is no. And gun culture, because a lot of the firearms industry seems to have a lot of like enthusiast drive. Yeah. There's a challenge to it, because don't get me wrong, just because you want to doesn't mean you're capable of doing it. And so I think some of the issues that we run into is it would be easy for a person to, let's just say, enter into a relationship with, say, a sponsor, or not a sponsor necessarily, but they're saying, well, I will do the work for you and I'll figure it out and I'll make it worth it. And at the end of the year, you're like, well, that wasn't worth it because I didn't. How is there a way that you can make that measurement so that we have kind of a both sides game? I don't want it to be.
Yeah. I'd say from the individual, like, because that's the role I'm usually in that relationship. I go, all right, so if this was in my tech consulting gig, what would I get paid for my efforts? Right, I'm going to put in 2 hours a week for this brand for the next year. What would I make if I did that at my day job? Okay, am I making at least that in this job? The first year you won't. Maybe the second year you won't. But if you've worked really hard, you should by year 2 or 3. So it's long game type stuff. But I look at that 4 or 5 years into a partnership and I'm going, if I'm not making what I would at my day job for the level of effort that I'm investing in here, maybe I should be investing in my day job further and then just shooting casually. Like, that's a thing that I use as a metric is, what would I make if I focus this effort somewhere else?
Do you still run your day job?
A little bit. Yep.
A little bit. Your tech consulting side?
Yeah. Yep. I still do some of that, a couple hours a day for sure.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yep.
I figured. Yep. I thought you were full shooter. Just there's nothing but Froelich, the handgun guy.
No, I still. Well, it's hard, right? When you find stuff you like to do. Like, I like to help people solve problems, and so the tech consulting piece, I literally get business owners that are like, "Hey, listen, like, I want my chemical company to do as well as possible." It's like, okay, great. I want to to do as well as possible too. But like, if you don't have appropriate levels of tech security, keeping your company up and running, like you're going to get hacked, you're going to get ransomware, you're going to get like, I can help them stay out of trouble. And so I enjoy that too.
Okay. So you've kind of found a balance. There's a word that I'm looking for that I can't seem to remember anymore, which seems to be a occasion in every single one of these recordings. But it's like, oh gosh. So maybe my lexicon is telling me that you're being pretentious, you fool. So my point being said then, or my question then is, you've reached some sort of symbiosis between these two fields, and you've kind of pushed hard into competition and pulled it into, you can function both. And that took time, I'm assuming. You've been competing for what, 10 years?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. Well, if I get gray before you.
You can't see it.
I'm graying, man. I've got a nice gray. You can't see it on the camera, but I am graying. Whatever. All right. So there is another thing that I want to talk about, and we have only so much time. So I'm going to I'm going to do a hard shift.
Cool.
You're running a training school, and you're engaged in trapping and self-reliance. Let's focus on trapping and self-reliance today. If we run out of time, we'll be there. I've watched you go from Josh the competition shooter, but now you're trapping, you're hunting, you're living the French fur trade dream, and the American, like there's a little bit of a Daniel Boone thing going on, and it's I'm okay with it, right? But the question that I'm saying is, how does that work? Like, how did you get into that one, and then what was the end goal? Did you look at trapping as a hobby? Or how did you approach that subject?
Yeah. So early on, we bought a 100-acre farm a couple of years ago, and we've been adding to it. It's been growing up since then. But I've got 26 acres of water on a chunk of it. And so around the edges, there was all kinds of damage from the beaver population, chewing down poplar trees, stuff like that. That's what they do. And so I reached out to a buddy of mine, and I was like, hey, man, you want to come over here and trap these things? And he's like, well, yeah, I'll teach you how to, which that's what good friends do, is they teach you how to do things versus just doing it for you. And so he came over and gave me a hand, taught me the ins and outs of being able to, set traps, do that kind of thing, be successful. And I immediately realized that this was an opportunity to get more out of the land to, this is where our food comes from. We eat beaver, raccoon, we eat stuff that we trap out here on the line. My kids are into it. My daughters are going, hey, when are we going trapping? I'm like, this is awesome. Getting the family outdoors. And then, over the last couple of years, it's been like, well, what's really cool is I can go get food right now if I want to. We're on 4,000 acres around us of state forest and kind of wild country. And I could run out there and set a few traps and get some things now if I want to. And that is a certain freedom to just know I can go get protein on the landscape whenever I want. We did the chicken thing. We made our farm semi-self-reliant to some extent. Obviously we'll run out of propane and, some of those things would be a problem. But being able to get food, have water, that kind of stuff here on our farm has been sort of this path we've been on of going, all right, let's be as self-sufficient as possible. And, oh, by the way, we do actually love this chasing critters out in the woods stuff too. It's become a big part of what we do.
Self-reliance is three terms: self-reliance, preparedness, and catastrophe. For whatever reason, those three usually get wrapped together, as in being able to be self-reliant. Which have you always been a rural living character, or have you no? So you had to pursue that deliberately, or?
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't know anything about it, and I'm still learning. Each year we take something new on. This last year, we made maple syrup for the first time. We've done it 2 times now. But learning how to just get stuff out of the land that we have right here, foraging, all of that stuff has become something I've been pretty interesting. And it's not necessarily like I'm not prepared. If there's a catastrophe, we're still in trouble. Like, don't get me wrong. But at the same point, 2 years ago when there wasn't like meat on the shelf for a little while, wife comes home and she goes, "There's some grocery issues." I was like, "Well, I go kill something real quick if it comes to it. We're good. Just with protein." And so there's some freedom in it, but again, like I'd have a lot more steps before I'd be prepared for like true catastrophe. Not there.
The reason why I engage or add catastrophe is I think very oftentimes let's just say the train of thought follows backwards. We start with when we're building goals, we're supposed to start with the end goal and then build our route to getting there. And in that same way that we build goals, we tend to try to provide semi-false motivation, and that is we begin with the catastrophe and then we try to and use the catastrophe as justification for the various motives, and then those motives become preparedness, and so why are you buying 400,000 rounds of ammunition? And why are you selling the farm and doing this? It's like, oh, because the end of the world is here. and I'm not saying that's not, it's not that there isn't concern for issues maybe in our socioeconomic world or whatever.
Yeah.
What I am saying is, it seems like the cart is so far before the horse that you might as well start over again and say self-reliance is itself a virtue.
Yeah.
And so what is so even segueing again, what does beaver taste like?
It's if you were going to compare it to something that a lot of people have tried, I would say like grass-fed bison. So if you were to eat that, again, it's an herbivore. It's a lean meat, and it is pretty damn delicious. So with the back straps, if you've ever been a whitetail hunter or any of that stuff, like you take the back straps out of a deer and they're the fine steak, right? Well, if you imagine a beaver, like the whole thing is a back strap. Like it's this beautiful steak all the way down the back. And so I'll get like 4 or 5 meals of just steak out of an adult beaver. Then we grind the quarters into burger and mix it into chili and do stuff like that. And so,
okay.
Yeah, it's good.
So there's trapping going on. There's maple gathering going on. You have your training school kind of building up, and then you recently built a lodge, and that lodge is specifically for
guests. So when we were hosting our events out here, and so like basically here's the summary on our events is I bring in like an instructor or two to instruct alongside with me. We bring 12 to 15 individuals out for the day, break into small groups of like 5, and we work on different skills. Each instructor focuses on a thing, small group, hands-on, like really high-end experience. And then what I was doing is, some of these are private for brands. Some of these are like writer events in the industry. Some of them are now public stuff that we're doing and hosting out on our facility to share the shooting sports with new people. And I was putting everybody up in like these VRBOs, like separate, and you lose that community. And you lose that opportunity to interface with these folks and develop relationship. And it costs a lot of money to book all of these different places. And so last year I was like, well, all right, we're going to have like 250 or 300 people out to our facility next year. I'm going to build an 8-bedroom guest lodge that is focused on community. So it's like a 48 by 60, every bedroom's nice. Got a bunk in it, full size down, twin up. Got a private bathroom in each bedroom. So like adults with means can enjoy themselves and have some privacy, stuff like that. But it's a small bedroom that makes you want to come out and be part of the community in this 48 by 40 common space. So we develop relationships. We get to know the folks. We tell stories. We have fun. And then we shoot guns and train, and iron sharpens iron kind of thing. And it's become this super cool experience that we're sharing with 250, 300 people a year, which is pretty cool.
Exciting. No, it's neat to see that grow, especially as you've been able to transition through different arenas in life, maybe, or different outcomes. And so that sense of community is a regular talking point on the show here, but more specifically, this desire, this sort of like pull and push of being involved in something greater, or having a motive or a meaning to people's like pursuits, is sort of that undergirding aspect. And I kind of have an odd question. This is a little bit ad lib for you, but I think a lot of young men are dealing with this idea of like meaninglessness. Like life is very difficult, especially in modern contemporary America, where in many ways we do live. It's not a far-fetched conclusion to say that we live in an age of opulence. We have iPhones from China. We've got food shipped in every day. You know, like a 3-course meal is cheaper than cooking a basic burnt hamburger on your grill. Like, you know, or a 3-star meal or whatever. Like, we live in an age where we kind of have to create artificial want. We're not dying of starvation, struggling up mountains, getting attacked by people. But I think a lot of that tends to also be romanticized as history is looked at with rose-colored glasses. And this idea that, well, before industrialization, we had this like, everyone had meaning and purpose and drive, and they didn't have to stare at the sun and say, why do I exist? And I mean, I think some of the answers, because, well, quite frankly, they probably just died. But like, if you don't have the will to feed yourself in 1808, you're not going to make it to 20. So like, you just kind of, but many of these things that you're engaged in and you're working on look like, I think they can be mistaken as the meaning, but they're really the result of meaning. Like you've been driving towards something, and it's not. And my question that I ask is, one, is my assessment correct that you've had your aim on something that has kind of pushed you through the last 12 years or whatever, and or maybe the other one is, has that even been a clear one? And when it's not clear, do you still keep moving, or how do you still keep moving? Because this is kind of the opportunity for Josh to be Josh. And
no huge vision, dude. There always is for today. There never is for 10 years out. You know, like I always think I shouldn't say that. I always have a plan, and then some other opportunity presents itself, and I'm like, I should do that, because if I did that, it would add value and it would be interesting thing to pursue. Like, I only work on stuff that's fun and makes me feel good. And so like, as I started doing this place, building this out, originally I built the gun range because I needed a place to practice. And then people wanted to come over and be part of what I was doing. And I'm like, man, this is awesome. From a community perspective, I now have the destination and I have a chance to reach people. I'm like, okay, this is super cool. Like, I should grow this. I could turn this into a business and be part of something I'm having a fun time doing. And so, you know, like, as much as I've been trying to figure out the path over the last 10, 12 years as it relates to the firearms industry, I've always just chased work that added value for me and other people, and I enjoyed doing, and been super open to new ideas as they were coming.
Chased work that added value. These are like almost like footnotes now. Chased work that added value, and
yep, for me and the companies or partners or the people involved in them. Yep, and I wanted to have fun while I was doing it. I can make a living a million ways. Like I'm a grinder. Like, I can go take any job and be good at it. Like, that's fine. It's like, but what do I want to work on today? Like, what do I want to do today? It's like, okay, well, firearms industry super interesting. The people around it are super interesting. Creating cool experiences for people to join and learn about what we do, super interesting. All of these masculine pursuits, again, like I'll go back to that, where today, if you were to just like go out into public, like it's a bad thing almost to be a dude. It's like, no, actually it's pretty good. It's pretty great. It's why we're where we are as a world, because, you know, masculine dudes stood up and built something, you know? So I'm like, there's nothing wrong with being a dude and being like into guns, into working hard, into the outdoors, providing for your family. Like all of these are actually super positive traits. And here we have a community of like-minded individuals that they see that too, and that's fun.
All right, then I'm gonna ask two more questions and give you the floor to answer them. And
Okay.
one of them is meant to be a critical question. You said something akin to, I only do the things that I have interest in, or the things that I have interest in or that I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
I think somebody looking from the outside in would say, well, how privileged. I'm not saying from like a political aspect.
No, I know.
But it's like, well, that's great, dude. But like, I don't have that liberty. How would you respond to something like that?
Yeah, it's the must be nice comment, right? Like, must be nice to be that, must be nice. And I get that. And the short answer is, you know what? I did a lot of stuff that I didn't, like early on in my adult career, as I developed the right or the opportunity to do only what I wanted to work on, I did all kinds of stuff I didn't want to work on, right? Like, that's what you do. You earn that. And, like my adult professional career was me knocking on doors, businesses' doors, selling copy machines. Like, I'm a grinder. Like, I'm a door-to-door business salesman that's where I started out of college. You think that's fun, getting told no and getting kicked out of, like, office complexes, like, 10 hours a day? Like, no, but I figured out how to be successful at it. And, like, once I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I can make money doing this. I can make money doing that. I can make money doing that. Now that's where it becomes, okay, like, what's more fun? I'm going to focus on what I enjoy doing, and I'm going to make that successful. And if it doesn't, then I'll work on this other thing. But, it's one of those things you got to earn, and you earn it through hard work, and you earn it by doing things that aren't that much fun. And once you get to that point where you've given yourself maybe some avenues to pick from, then you work on the one that you enjoy the most. And that's where I'm at in my life. I'm a 40-year-old man who's worked my tail off for the last 20 years. And now I can point in several directions to make a living. And I work on the ones that I have the most fun doing.
Okay. So the last question then is the culture question on masculinity.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've had longer conversations on the subject in the past. I just quite frankly don't remember, but I think it's easy to look out in the world for men to say, well, the world doesn't want me to be a man, and so I can live in the state of perpetually complaining about it but never acting differently. Maybe men can be like, well, I mean, it's not hard to look out at the world right now. If you look out at the world right now, it's not hard to figure out that it's literally everything works for, or not literally, I'm sorry. Everything in Western society is built for praising the worst traits in women and destroying or crushing down the best traits in men. And so, like, you look at education, you can look at hiring and HR, you can look at all these kind of things where, like, if you are a masculine dude with any form of assertion, you will not get a job because the person who works at HR, doesn't like that or whatever. And so the point that I'm saying in all of this issue is that, like, it's not hard to look out at the world and find a near infinite amount of criticism to be leveled at the world, especially the Western world, in the way that it treats men.
Yeah.
But that criticism doesn't produce anything itself. And in some ways, it's antithetical to masculinity, where I don't think that men act masculine when they have to ask for permission from people whose opinions they don't respect. And so for you, when for people who are listening to this and they see and they know a little bit about you, or they don't know, but they get to hear Josh Froelich, world competition shooter, business owner, consultant, instructor, landowner, whatever, their only observation of you is that they get to see you when you're riding high on the horse, and they didn't get to see the path to get there.
Yep.
And whatever, whether it's from business, but when it comes to specifically, we're talking about masculinity. What advice would you give to especially men in our world today who are aware of the challenges or not aware, who cares? And then in regards to this masculine pursuits, like, what would you say? and not a political statement. If you want to, that's fine. It doesn't bother me. But it's like, I don't need a platitude. It's just go and do it. I don't know. Like, what would you say about this whole masculinity issue? Not how bad it is out there, but something else.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, one of the things that I've never done, and I think it's a strength now that I look back, but it may have cost me a little along the way, is I've never really asked for permission to be me. Because I am me. I'm a dude. I'm a masculine guy. I have masculine pursuits. Like, I don't ask if that's okay. I just pursue things the way that I want to. And that doesn't always get well received, but it gets well received in places that I'll be successful, right? And so if you fail to get some job because you're a dude and because you have masculine tendencies, probably not the job for you, would be my suggestion. Like,
that's
maybe find like-minded people because, I don't know. That's what I've done, is just I've been me. And I mean, like, I'm a business dude with a big old beard. I've got tattoos. Like, I'm in the business world. Like, I'm that guy. I'm that guy that is
you millennial.
I don't fit in.
I don't know. And I don't know, man. Two white dudes with tattoos and beards sitting here talking about culture and business and masculinity. Heavens. So your point that you're saying, because I like it. Unfortunately, you know, I've used it before. Is that like free men don't ask for permission?
Yeah, I mean, you could, but like, is that going to put you in a better position? No, it's certainly not going to align with, like, if I don't know what other people feel like inside. Like, I can't answer all that stuff. But for me, it's like, I'm going to pursue and be me, and that means I'm going to set goals. I'm going to go get them. I'm going to have a family. I'm going to provide. I'm going to work in a business role, and I'm going to add value. Like, these are considered masculine traits. Some of them are. And I'm going, sure, like, that's just me. I'm a dude. Like, I am a guy. So, like, should I feel bad for working hard, or should I feel bad for being assertive? Like, no, I'm not going to. And maybe that'll bug some people. But, like, that's who I am, and I'm pretty straight up about it. You know, I'm just an authentic dude.
Well, I think in closing, one thing that I have appreciated about you in this conversation and like conversations we've had in the past is that there's a level of assertion that is respectful, and it's not like I can definitely see there's a differentiation between being assertive and being bullish, I guess.
Sure.
You know, like, yeah. I mean, you can lie to yourself and say, oh, I'm just being assertive, when you're actually just being obstinate. You can do that, but unfortunately, I don't think that track plays out well. Well, Josh, I think we're out of time. I would like to conclude this conversation. I really did enjoy the time we got to spend talking about competition. I look forward to hopefully another one in the future where we continue down the conversation on like business development and character development and masculinity and seeing how things go. But thanks for coming on the show. Where can people find you? And where can people find you? And if they want to get involved in some of the other things that you do, or they want to attend your classes or follow your competition.
I'd say Josh Froelich on Facebook or Instagram, Froelich, or you can look up F5 Range on Instagram or Facebook. Smaller page. We just put out a bunch of cool stuff on what we're up to out here. So if you want some training content, you want to see what we're up to, that might be a good place to go. And then F5 Productions, F5 Productions on Instagram is where we're putting out a bunch of super cool, high speed, fun to watch, entertaining media from all of the action shooting events around the country.
Josh Froelich, the media mogul. Sounds good. Well, this has been the Redacted Culture Cast. Thank you for listening. If you want to support the channel, you can head over to redactedllc.com. You follow us on Instagram at redactedllc, and this has been a delve into the higher ends of competition shooting. So thank you, Josh. Thank you for coming on. Thank you those who are listening for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.